Myself is Savitha. Welcome to MUB classes associated with Department of Journalism, St. Philomena College and News Kabaka. In last class we discussed about American War of Independence and French Revolution. Today we are going to discuss about Russian Revolution which broke out in Russia in the year 1917. A revolution which was started in Russia in the year 1917 is considered as one of the greatest revolution which took place in the world in a 20th century. So what were the reasons for Russian Revolution which was broke out in the year 1917? See, Russia was ruled by Romanov dynasty in a 20th century which was headed by or which was led by number of weak ruler continuously. This Russian country or Russia which was ruled by Alexander II, Alexander III and Nicholas II at the time of revolution. So these rulers were basically autocrat, means they were centralizing each and every power in their hands, means they were not giving or they not provided a freedom or a liberty or a equality to a people. They were autocrat or dominant in the political as well as economic and social field. So they were centralizing power and they were exploiting a common people. And thing is, we can see censorship which was imposed in Russia on a press, means people were unaware of the weakness of government of Russia at that time because they were unknown or far away from a news or a media. Press or writers had no permission to write anything against a government or a rulers. That's why people were not aware of weakness or we can say weak government or exploitation which were done by rulers of Russia. This autocracy which led to a revolution of or which this exploitation led to a revolution of 1917 in Russia. And with this we can say reactionary czar, say we are calling rulers of Russia as czars. A number of rulers who ruled in Russia, among them few were reactionary, means they were introducing number of rules and regulations which were difficult to follow by common people. For example, Tsar Alexander III who introduced one rule or who introduced one law that is famously known as Russification. What is this Russification? Under this policy or under this rule or under this law, he introduced one special rule for a common people, that is, in Russia, one faith, one king and one rule will be there. And Russian people who does not speak or who don't know to speak a Russian language and Russian people who are not a member of Russian church is not considered as Russian citizens. Means people who don't know the Russian language and who are not a member of Russian church were not getting a citizenship of Russia. As we know, if we are not citizens of one country, we are not able to get any facilities which were introduced by one particular country. So same thing happened in even Russia. Say because of the policy of Russification, a common people, say Russia was not consisting only Russian people at that time, migrated people of different countries who settled there and who started their life in Russia, who don't know the language of Russia and who were not a member of Russian church because they were following or they were a member or they were a people of different faith. So these people were not getting any facilities, and these people, even though they were living in Russia for a number of years or from number of years, they were not getting any facilities or they were not getting a Russian citizenship, means they started to raise their voice against a government. So because of weak rulers of Romanov dynasty and because of inability, rulers who were not capable to rule, or because of inefficient rulers who ruled Russia or inefficient czars who ruled Russia, and because of a censorship which was introduced in Russia, and because of these reactionary czars and even Russian czars in 20th century, especially our last czar of Russia, that is Tsar Nicholas II, who was always assisted by his weak queen or we can say a foolish queen, that is Tsarina Alexandra. So interference of Tsarina Alexandra as well as interference of one infamous monk, that is Rasputin, made a government more weak, or more, we can say in Russia, more confusion emerged because of the interference of these two personalities in the administration of czars in Russia. So these political causes ultimately led to the revolution of Russia in the year 1917. Say weak rulers, autocratic rulers, or a dominant personalities or a dominant rulers who were centralizing power in their hands without giving any freedom or a liberty to a people, and reactionary rulers who were introducing number of laws. Say even in Russia, year by year they were introducing different laws, and they were, we can say, varieties of laws which were introduced by Russian czars. Varieties means different rules or different regulations for a common crime which was done by people who were belonging to a different section or different social and economic background. Such a rules or such a regulations which created a confusion in a society, and this ultimately led to a revolution of 1917 in Russia. With these political causes, number of other reasons, for example social causes. See, because of political inequality, because of lack of freedom or a liberty to a people, we can see a social inequality in a society. Russian society consisting number of classes in a society, or a number of classes or people who were belonging to a different classes we can see in a Russia. So this difference in a classes which led to a social inequality as well as economical inequality. See, in Russia 94.5% of people were belonging to a peasant family, or we can consider them as a farmers. See, among those peasants, number of people were serfs, means they had no land or no property. They were working either for very low wages or for without wages, means we can call them as, or people who were working just like slaves. See here, because of this difference or a social difference in a society or social inequality which created in a society, led to a number of evils, or led to a emergence of number of evils in a Russian society. For example, social inequality automatically led to a economic inequality which created number of problems in society. For example, poverty. Because of poverty, common people were not able to get education, which ultimately led to a problem of illiteracy. Poverty and illiteracy led to a problem like corruption in a Russian society. It is said that, or one saying was there in Russia, everything was corrupt and everything was unjust in Russia. Means every post or every government post in Russia was purchased by highest bidders. Means who have money, they can get a government post, means they can purchase a government post. Means here ability had no importance. In Russian society, ability or a qualification had no importance. Means people who had money, people who had economic and social status were assuming a highest power or authority in a Russian society. And one more saying was there in Russia. In Russia, two were everywhere. Means Tsar and God. Means in Russia, they were believing in a divine right of kingship. Means king is considered as a representative of God on earth. As a result of this, king is compared to a god on earth. Means he is considered as a person who was sent by God to, or for the welfare activities in a Russian society. So these feelings created, or such a rules or such a circumstances created a social inequality, ultimately which led to a emergence of number of social evils in a Russian society. So corruption, illiteracy, poverty or social inequality, or a lack of freedom in Russian society again created problems, or again created a revolution, not in a society in the beginning, but in the minds of people, that is the minds of people of Russian society. So these two political and economic causes, boosted by economic causes which created, or economic problems which created in Russia. As you know, political inequality and social inequality ultimately leads to economic inequality. Say, because to stable economic condition of Russia, czars of Russia who started to impose number of taxes on common people. So types of taxes or number of taxes which were increased day by day created few more problems in Russian society. And as you know, I said more than 94.5% of people were peasants, and among them number of people were serfs, and condition of serfs was really miserable. Means they were sold by owners or people just as a goods, or just like goods, means with a land even serfs were sold in our markets. So these social inequality automatically created economic inequality, which created again problems or social evils like poverty and illiteracy. So we can say when we are poor and when we are not getting education, means automatically we are not getting livelihood or sufficient food for our livelihood, or for our life, means we are not getting sufficient food for our life or to lead our life. So such a condition led to a involvement of people in a crimes to get a food. It was not because of their because to become rich, but because to get a livelihood. So such a problems again created economic disparity or social gap between a ruling as well as a ruled and ruling class. So these three causes automatically led to a revolution of 1917. With the social and economic and political causes, we can even say number of other reasons which led to this revolution. What are those other reasons except political, economic and social causes? Say first of all, industrial revolution. As you know, 18th century witnessed for an industrial revolution in England. See, in the beginning, industrial revolution which was broke out in London, which spread or which started in London or England, later it spreaded towards other countries of the world. So industrial revolution even started in Russia in 18th century after England or London. So this industrial revolution led to emergence of number of factories or industries. And as you know, emergence of if factory started by any personality or any capitalist, means he will feel the necessity of workers and raw materials. So even in Russia, same situation created because of industrial revolution. Capitalist or factory owners who started to feel the necessity of laborers as well as raw materials. For that purpose, they started to appoint common people to factories or industries. You see, industrial revolution already decreased importance of agriculture. So automatically people who were living in rural areas, who lost their importance in their traditional works, for example we can say handloom or few other professions, pottery making or sewing or other works where they were depended for their livelihood, mat making, glass making, such a works they were depended on such a work for their livelihood. But thing is, after industrial revolution they lost their work because machine made goods occupied their handmade goods or a position of their handmade goods. So as a result of this, they lost their work or they lost their job. So automatically they depended on factories or industries. So they started to participate or they started to occupy a position of laborers in factories or industries without any option for their livelihood. So this was a situation which was created in Russia, and where capitalists or industrial owners who started to utilize or who started to exploit common people who were working in factories. More than that, these capitalists or these industrial owners who started to appoint number of women and children in factories or industries, because they were working for low wages, and children especially, they were utilizing their maximum or they were putting their maximum effort in their works for low wages. So as a result of this, Condition of workers become miserable day by day. So as a result of this, they started to face a number of problems. It means Russian commoners or common people who were working in factories or industries, they started to face number of problems, because in factories they were working in a hazardous condition, means they were not getting good lighting facilities, or we can say ventilation, lack of ventilation, and overworking hours, means they used to work or they forced to work more than 12 or 18 hours, means whole day without seeing day and night. They forced to work in factories or industries. Not only that, see, whenever they were facing some problems in factories or industries, for example losing limbs because of work or because of machines, they were not providing any facilities for such a workers, or they were not getting any compensation for such a problems. So this led to again created a miserable condition in Russia. Say if they are losing their leg or hand or some other limbs of their body, they were removed from a work and they were not finding any other choice for their livelihood. So in such a condition, again they were pushed towards poverty. So such a problems which emerged because of industrial revolution increased the poverty level in Russia, and women who forced to work in factories and industries, they were not able to manage their home and their working hours. So this again created problems not only in a Russian society but also in the minds of Russian people. So with this industrial revolution or industrial revolution also supported by military weakness of Russia. As you know, Russia was indulging in a number of wars from many years. For example, in 1854 it fought one war with Turkey, that is famously known as Crimean War. In this war, a small nation Turkey defeated one of the biggest nations of the world, that is Russia. So after this Crimean War, Russia indulged or participated in one more war in the year 1905, that is famously known as Russo-Japanese War. So in this war, once again, a small nation of the world, Japan, defeated one of the biggest nations of the world, that is Russia. So after these two wars, once again in the year 1914, Russia participated in one more war, that is a First World War. So Russia participated in this war in favor of France and England, and in the beginning or in the year 1916 and 1917, Russia bitterly defeated in the hands of Austria. So success, that is a continuous defeat in the hands of small nations of the world, explored a military weakness of Russia to the world, not only for our Russians. So this military weakness of Russia created a feeling of insecurity in the minds of Russian people. As you know, we are feeling secure in our country because we are feeling that our soldiers will provide a security for us. Our soldiers or our military force will protect us from foreign attacks. But in Russia, because of defeat which was faced by Russia continuously from small countries, made Russian people to feel that we are insecure inside country because our military force is very weak. So this insecurity led to a problem in Russian society, because Russian people started to think that without removing a Russian ruler, that is Tsar Nicholas II, from a power, it's impossible to get a security for ourselves. If he is there in a power, it's impossible to reorganize our army, and he is not able and he is not capable to provide a security for our Russian people. So this military weakness of Russia again led to a revolution of 1917, and with this military weakness of Russia, intellectual personalities also become a reason for this revolution. Say, pen is mightier than sword. As I said already in our last classes, intellectual personalities become a great reason behind a revolution, either of French Revolution, even in a Russian Revolution or any other revolutions of the world world were boosted by intellectual personalities of different areas at different times. So even in Russia, at that time, Karl Marx, who was a German thinker, who was not belong to Russia, he was a German thinker who explored exploitation which was going on in our world because of industrial revolution through his works, that is Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto. Das Kapital, a famous book which is considered as Bible of Communism and even considered as Bible of Russian Revolution. This book influenced a lot to our Russian people, and he is Karl Marx is famously known as father of communism or father of scientific socialism. His ideas of communism or his communist ideology, which was explored through his book Das Kapital, which was published in the year 1848, and one more his book, that is the Communist Manifesto, influenced Russian people a lot. So German thinker and his communist ideology influenced not a German people a lot, but Russian and Chinese people. So here Russian people influenced by ideologies of Karl Marx and other people who were influenced by Karl Marx. For example, Leo Tolstoy, who wrote a famous book, that is War and Peace, and Anna Karenina, two works which were written by Leo Tolstoy, influenced Russian people or a common people of Russia with the Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto. War and Peace and Anna Karenina of Leo Tolstoy influenced Russian people. So here Karl Marx, Leo Tolstoy, and with the Karl Marx and Leo Tolstoy, few more writers were there who influenced Russian people. For example, Turgenev, who wrote Fathers and Sons, and one more writer, that is Maxim Gorky, who wrote the work called The Mother and Children of the Sun. So these writers, and Fyodor Dostoevsky, who wrote a book called The Poor Folk. So these workers and their writings, which explored our Russian society and which threw a light on weak administration and autocratic administration of a Romanov dynasty or a weak czars of Russia, or which provided a knowledge of Russian society and administration and economic system to a common people, automatically led to a revolution in the minds of Russian people. With this, we can say communist ideologies of Karl Marx, as well as Engel, a friend of Karl Marx, whose works influenced personalities like Leo Tolstoy and Trotsky and Turgenev, etc. These personalities were influenced by Engel and Karl Marx. So such a writings which influenced Russian people, whatever it may be, with political, we studied about political causes, economic causes, social causes, and industrial revolution and military weakness of Russia, and intellectual causes. With this, one sudden reason which led to a revolution of Russia in the year 1917, that is a food crisis. As you know, if we are facing a social inequality, economic crisis in any country, automatically or definitely we will face a problem of livelihood or problem of food crisis. So same thing happened in Russia. So as a result of this, in the year 1917, in the month of March, women of Petrograd city who started their strike in streets against a food problem which was emerged in Russia. So they started their strike against Tsar Nicholas II, who was ruling in Russia. So ultimately or automatically or as a sudden reaction to this strike, Tsar Nicholas II gave an order to a military force of Russia to open a fire on women who started their strike in Russian streets, especially in a Petrograd city. So, but thing is, instead of opening a fire on Russian women who started their strike against a ruler, military force who were already suffered a lot because of continuous wars or because of problems or a weak administration of a Romanov dynasty, who themselves supported or indulged in a strike or themselves supported and participated in a strike which was started by women of Russia. So, strike became more and more powerful, and we started to spread all over Russia, and ruler Tsar Nicholas II, who was not able to control the situation, who resigned for his post or who resigned for the post of Tsar in Russia. So as a result of this, we are calling this revolution which was broke out in the year 1917 in the month of March is famously known as March Revolution. But in the process of revolution, which was started with the women of Petrograd city, two political parties emerged in Russia, that is Menshevik party and Bolshevik party. Menshevik party, which was headed by Alexander Kerensky, and Bolshevik party, which was headed by Lenin, or we can call him as a Vladimir Lenin. So here a March revolution, or a revolution which was started in the month of March, was headed by or led by or dominated by a Menshevik party, or we can say Alexander Kerensky. So in the month of March, our revolution came to an end for a period, and government which was, or a provincial government which was established or which was created by Menshevik party, which was headed by Alexander Kerensky. But a revolution, we can say revolution was not stopped with this revolution of March. Problems which was increased when a government or a provincial government failed to satisfy a three section of people in Russia. Same after establishment of provincial government in Russia, Alexander Kerensky, who provided a liberty, equality, and who banned a number of unnecessary taxes which was existed in Russian society, or which were imposed on a common people of Russia. But he failed to satisfy three section of people. They were soldiers, workers, and laborers. See, thing is here, soldiers, workers, and peasants. Here, why he failed to satisfy these three section of people? See, soldiers were participating in a wars from many years, or they were indulging themselves in a wars from 1854 itself. See here, Alexander Kerensky, who failed to satisfy a three section of people. They were soldiers, peasants, and workers. See what happened, why he failed to satisfy these three section of people. See, these three section of people facing problems at that time in Russia. Say soldiers who were participating in different wars continuously from 1854, they were not getting a rest, or they were not getting a peace. You know, they participated in a Crimean War, Russo-Japanese War, again in a First World War. So in the year 1917, when our Russian Revolution broke out, or when Alexander Kerensky, who assumed a power of provincial government, he never called a Russian army from a First World War. As a result of this, soldiers were continuously fighting in a First World War, or they were in a war with England and France. So they were feeling a necessity of peace and rest for themselves. But here Alexander Kerensky, who failed to provide a peace or rest for a people, because he supported England and France in a First World War with a huge military force of Russia, even though he was defeated in the hands of Austria in the beginning. So that's why he failed to satisfy soldiers, means he failed to provide a peace and rest for a soldier. That's why he failed to satisfy soldiers in Russia. And second, peasants. Say peasant at that time, before revolution, land, say 94.5% of people of Russia were peasants, but majority of people of Russia were peasants, or majority of citizens of Russia were peasants. But major lands, or majority of land, which was under the control of minority class. So as a result of this, peasants were feeling a necessity of land to do their agricultural activities. But even after assuming a power of provincial government, Alexander Kerensky failed to provide a land for a peasants, because he failed to confiscate a land which were under the control of ruling class as well as church. So as a result of this, again he failed to satisfy one more class of Russian society, that is peasants. And third section, that is a worker. As you know, because of industrial revolution, workers were forced to work more than 12 and 18 hours work. So as a result, see, even though they were working, or if they were overburdened by more work, they were not getting sufficient wages for their work. That's why, see, they were not satisfied with their work, or they were they were not satisfied with that is factory owners, because they were not getting sufficient wages. But even after assuming a power of provincial government, Alexander Kerensky failed to provide good wages for workers who were working in different industries and factories. So as a result of this, we can say he failed to satisfy three sections of people: soldiers, workers and peasants. So this is considered as watchwords of Russian Revolution, that is peace for soldiers, land for peasants and wages for workers, or food for workers. We can say peace for soldiers, land for peasants and food for workers. Means if they are not getting good wages, they will not get food, or they will not get livelihood. So we can say Alexander Kerensky failed to satisfy these three sections of people. So as a result of this, once again a revolution which was started in the minds of these three sections of people. So as a result of this, in the month of October, once again a revolution broke out, but which was headed by Vladimir Lenin, that is, we can say a Bolshevik party. Say suddenly, in a day itself, they removed a provincial government from a power, or Alexander Kerensky from a power, without much bloodshed. They disconnected our telephone and telegraphic lines, and they removed a provincial government, and Vladimir Lenin, who emerged as more dominant personality and who assumed power of Russia in the year 1917 in the month of October. So with the emergence of Vladimir Lenin in Russia, a revolution came to an end in the month of October in the year 1917. So here in the year 1917, as a result of revolution, one new nation emerged, that is famously known as USSR, that is Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, which was headed by Vladimir Lenin, or which was presided by Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin, who came to power in the year 1917, who ruled Russia as a president in Russia till 1924. So rule of Vladimir Lenin is considered as one of the greatest era which was passed, or which was passed in the history of Russia. So emergence of USSR is considered, and emergence of USSR as well as emergence of Vladimir Lenin is considered as one of the greatest result of revolution of Russia in the year 1917. With this, we can say spread of communism. After a revolution of Russia, we can see a spread of communism not only in Russia but all over the world. Russia started to spread a communist ideology in different nations of the world, which ultimately led to a Cold War after a Second World War. Except these two results, see, we can see end of Tsarist rule, or end of Romanov dynasty, or rule of Romanov dynasty in Russia, and we can say government which was replaced by monarchy in Russia. So these are few results of this war, this revolution, that is end of Tsarist rule, end of monarchy, or end of Tsar Nicholas II, or rule of Tsar Nicholas II, and spread of communism. These are few results of this Russian revolution. Anyway, world saw one communist, or a first communist government in Russia after the end of this revolution, or influence of communist ideology in Russia for the first time in the world. So from 1917 till 1924, from 1917 till 1924, Vladimir Lenin was there in power in Russia, who died in the year 1924 because of continuous stroke which he faced because of two bullets. He was shot by two bullets, but one bullet doctors successfully removed from his head, but one bullet was remained in his head in the year 1918. But after successful operation, doctors were able to remove only one bullet from his head, and one bullet was remained in his head. Because of that, he was facing continuous strokes year by year, and he became bedridden later. And in the year 1924, his power, or his rule, came to an end in the USSR, or in USSR. So he was succeeded by Joseph Stalin, who ruled till 1954. So this is about Russian Revolution. We studied about Russian Revolution, means causes, process and results. And if you have any doubt, or if you have any comments, you can put it in a comment box.